Hey, welcome back to Crime Time 911. Today's case is one that many of us could relate to. The victim was an ordinary father who would do anything to make his wife and young daughter happy. Like many of us, he decided to place an ad online to sell his truck. Little did he know this would be the reason his wife and daughter would never see him again. This is the case of Tim Bosma. Tim Bosma was born on August 12, 1980 to Hank and Mary. He had three sisters, Michelle, Stephanie, and Jen. Tim and Charlene had met online. During the first date, Tim had shaved, revealing his baby face. Charlene would tell him that he looked like he was 18 years old and that she had a sister who was 18. Tim joked that maybe he should date her sister. Tim would tell Charlene that she was the weirdest girl he had ever met. At the end of their first date, they shook hands before parting ways. After a few more dates, Charlene and Tim knew that they were made for each other. Eventually, they got married and had a baby girl. At only 32 years old, Tim loved country music, ran his own business, and loved his Dodge Ram 3500 diesel with chrome running boards. However, the truck was beginning to cost him more and more money, so Tim decided to sell it. He placed an ad online in hopes that someone would purchase it. On May 6, 2013, Tim made arrangements for a prospective buyer to test drive the truck. However, as the sun began to set and darkness started to creep in, the person still hadn't arrived. This was when the first feelings that something was off had come over Tim. Tim would ask his wife Charlene if he should go on the test drive. She told him that he should go to ensure that the truck comes back. Finally, just after 9 p.m., two men walked up the Bosma's driveway. The fact that these men were on foot raised even more suspicions because Tim and Charlene lived in a rural area outside of Ancaster, Ontario. At about 9:20 p.m., despite the fact that both Tim and Charlene thought the whole situation was strange, Tim would go with the two men on a test drive in his truck. Little did Charlene know this would be the last time she saw her husband. When Tim still hadn't come home an hour later, Charlene called his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Charlene knew that Tim had just recently charged his phone, so there was no reason why his phone would be shut off. Immediately, Charlene knew something wasn't right, so she called the police to tell them what had happened. So, yeah, selling things online to me is like one of the scariest things, not just for scammers, but for situations where, people are coming to your home possibly, or you're going to their home and you just never know who's on the other end. So whenever we decide to sell things online, I always make sure that either my husband is home or we meet somewhere public because you just can't be too careful these days. The next morning, Tim still hadn't arrived back home. A longtime friend of the Bosmas, Mike, was driving past the Bosmas' house on May 7th and noticed that there was a police car still in the driveway. When he drove in, he was told by Charlene's stepdad that Tim was still missing and that they needed to get a hold of family and friends to start searching for him. Very quickly, the number of people who volunteered to look for Tim grew into the hundreds. They started from the Bosma home and started expanding their search outwards. They searched rural areas, along roads and highways. Social media was used to get the word out of Tim's disappearance. This, of course, started many conspiracy theories as to why Tim had disappeared without a trace. Was Tim involved in something? Did he intentionally run off? Did he owe money to someone? However, after investigation into Tim's life, nothing suspicious had been found. He was a normal father and husband, just living his life and providing for his wife and daughter. Just 48 hours after Tim's disappearance, police held a media conference announcing that, as per the nature of Tim's disappearance, the homicide unit would be taking over the investigation. Charlene would make an emotional plea to the men who had taken her husband, asking them to just let him come home, drop him off somewhere, or even make an anonymous call to the police to tell them where they could find him. When Charlene said that it was just a truck in her plea, this was when people realized that this whole incident was random. Tim wasn't necessarily targeted for any reason. They just decided to fake interest in purchasing Tim's truck as an easy way to lure an unsuspecting victim away from family and friends into the hands of two dark and horrific men. Charlene stated in an interview that her and her father were talking about the potential condition Tim could be in when they found him. Maybe he hadn't eaten. He could be dehydrated. Maybe he was badly beaten. How much time would he have to stay in the hospital? How would this affect his mental health? The thought that something more horrible than that never crossed her mind. Then one day, Charlene would receive a phone call. Tim's name appeared on the caller ID. The person on the other end wasn't Tim. It was someone who had found his phone in an industrial area. This raised hope for Charlene, finally a small break in the case. She now knew that Tim did not have his phone with him, and that's why he didn't answer when she called him the night he went missing. By this time, police had already pulled the records of Tim's phone. This information led them to someone else in the Toronto area who was also selling a Dodge Ram truck and had gone on a test drive with two men that sounded a lot like the two men that Tim was last seen with. So this other person, I'm guessing before, probably went on the test drive before Tim had disappeared. They really had no idea how lucky they were to come out of that test drive safely. Like, I wonder what had happened on that test drive where they just decided to let that person go, thankfully. Eventually, the name of Dylan Millard would come to the attention of police. Dylan was born into an aviation family. At the age of 14, he made headlines as the youngest to fly both a helicopter and airplane by himself on the same day. Dylan seemed to have a bright future ahead of him. But in his 20s, he would take a turn. He dropped out of university and started partying. Dylan became known as the rich kid with the pool, video games, and substances. An anonymous source would say that it was clear by Dylan's choice of substances he wanted to push his limits. She would state that Dylan thought he was untouchable, almost having a god complex. Dylan would start committing crimes like robbery and dealing substances. He even started producing adult videos. All of this would lead to Dylan meeting Mark Smitch, 23, who liked to make gory videos and produced gangsta rap. In 2013, Dylan was 27 years old and had taken over the family business. This is what prompted him to start looking for a heavy-duty truck, which in turn led Dylan to reach out to Tim when he saw Tim's Dodge Ram online. Video footage on May 6 would show Tim's truck being followed by a dark SUV. It's thought that Dylan was driving the truck while Mark followed close behind in the SUV. It's speculated that at this time, Tim was in the passenger seat of his own truck and had already been unalived. More video footage shows the truck stopped near Brantford, Ontario, where the license plates were switched so that it wouldn't catch the eye of police. Just past midnight, the truck is seen on video at the Millard Air Hangar at the Waterloo Airport. It was now towing a trailer with a piece of heavy equipment on it. Soon after Dylan and Mark entered the hangar, it's seen on video that the equipment on the trailer bursts into flames, burning all night. The next day, on May 7th, the staff at Millard Air Hangar would receive a text from Dylan telling them to stay away from the hangar. When the staff was allowed to return to work on Wednesday, May 8th, one of the workers, Art Jennings, became suspicious when he noticed a Dodge Ram truck that matched the description of Tim Bosma's truck inside the hangar. It was the chrome running boards that really stuck out to Art. As Art thought about it, he grew more and more suspicious, so on Thursday, May 9th, he would take a picture of the truck and the VIN number. He then called 911 to ask them to check the VIN number to see if it matched Tim's missing truck. When the police confirmed that it was, in fact, the same truck, Art would become physically ill. He wouldn't tell the police where they could find the truck until that Friday because he feared for the safety of himself and his family. But by this time, the truck was already gone, and Tim Bosma had already been missing for 4 days. Police placed Dylan under surveillance at the Millard hangar and then arrested him shortly after. Dylan still had the keys to Tim's truck on him and was charged with forcible confinement and theft over $5,000. Charlene was hopeful now that Dylan had been arrested. She thought that he would reveal where Tim was and her nightmare would all be over. Police then received a tip which prompted them to go to Dylan's mother's house. In her driveway, they found a large vehicle trailer, in which they seized and searched. When police opened the doors of the trailer, they found Tim's truck inside, as well as evidence such as Dylan's fingerprints. They sprayed the truck with luminol, which revealed large amounts of blood that someone attempted to clean up. Upon further investigation, police were directed to a large clearing on Dylan's property, in which they discovered the trailer with the large piece of equipment that had been seen on the video days earlier. What was on the trailer was something called the Eliminator, which is an industrial incinerator which is designed to dispose of unalived animals by burning at 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. So the fact that this basically confirms that this crime was carefully planned. Like, I didn't even know that there was a piece of equipment like this that even existed until I started researching this case. And looking at the photos of the Eliminator, it looked quite new to me, which further shows that Dylan and Mark planned to unalive someone at that time. Forensic anthropologists searched the inside of the Eliminator. This is when they discovered charred remains of Tim Bosma. Police continued to search and excavate Dylan's property, looking for evidence of other crimes. Before this horrific crime against Tim, a girl that Dylan had been seeing also went missing. Laura Babcock was described as outgoing. Just after she graduated from the University of Toronto, she met Dylan. They had a friends with benefits kind of relationship. Eventually, Laura would meet and start dating Sean Lerner. Despite this new love interest, Dylan stayed within Laura's circle of friends. In the summer of 2012, Laura had gone missing, and Sean was determined to find out what happened to her. He obtained Laura's phone records and discovered that the last few phone calls before her disappearance were made to Dylan. Sean took the phone records to the police, but the police did absolutely nothing. No investigation, no questioning, nothing at all. If the police had just started looking into Dylan when Laura had first disappeared, perhaps Tim's life could have been spared. I really wish that police would take missing persons reports more seriously. Like, I understand that some people might willingly want to disappear, but I think that there would be some sort of proof that they were still alive somewhere. Like, their bank accounts might be active, cell phone records, like anything. Something would be kind of, evidence that they were alive and well, just, away from friends, family, whatever, starting a new life somewhere else maybe. Because in a world of technology, I feel like it would be extremely difficult to disappear without a trace. However, if someone who disappeared under mysterious circumstances, there would be no proof, like zero evidence that they were still alive somewhere. At least that's my opinion. Sean had filed a complaint against the police, stating, quote, "The missing investigation was just abandoned and left open in bureaucratic limbo. The police just gave up looking for her." But that's not the first time police had dropped the ball when it came to Dylan. In November 2012, a man named Marty McDougall had placed an ad online selling a motorcycle in downtown Toronto. One day, he came home and both the motorcycle and its trailer were missing. Marty would call the Toronto police because there was a security camera across the street and he thought that the police might be able to identify the person who had stolen the motorcycle and the trailer. The police had obtained the footage, and after Marty hadn't heard anything from the police, he phoned and emailed the officer multiple times, but never got a response back. So here we go. Here's number 2, where police had a chance to look into and potentially arrest Dylan for yet another crime, which also could have potentially led to saving Tim's life down the road. But here we are again, police failing to investigate this crime as well. It wasn't until after the discovery of Tim's remains, Hamilton police would contact Marty to advise him that they had found his trailer and his bike, which had been disassembled, at, you guessed it, the Millard's hangar. The purpose of the Millard air hangar was to provide maintenance to aircrafts. However, Dillon had used it to store all of his toys, vehicles, Sea-Doos, motorcycles, and more, many of which had been stolen. It said that Wayne Millard, Dillon's father, and the company's CEO had threatened to cut Dillon off because he was spending way too much money but wasn't running or maintaining the family business. Wayne and his father, Dillon's grandfather, had worked hard to build the business into a success, and the last thing he wanted was for Dillon to ruin it. November 29th, 2012, Wayne Millard suddenly passed. Friends had said that they were told that Wayne had suffered a brain aneurysm. However, it was discovered later that he had actually been unalived by an injury to the head with a weapon that police commonly carry. You know what I'm talking about? The Toronto police would quickly state that Wayne had ended it all and would not investigate any further. So here we go. Third time, a suspicious circumstance around Dillon, and yet the police did the bare minimum and let a criminal slip through their fingers. Like, this was potentially the first evidence that Dillon had actually unalived somebody willingly, and yet the police just pushed it off as, Wayne decided to end his own life, I guess, and didn't do any further investigation just to, rule out any other possibilities. I don't even know what to say. This is just so disturbing. It took the unaliving of Tim and the discovery of his remains on Dillon's property before the police would charge Dillon with the unaliving of both his father and Laura. It was later determined that Dillon had purchased the Eliminator in late June 2012. A short time later, this is when Laura had disappeared. So, as I said before, I thought that maybe he had purchased the Eliminator just before Tim had disappeared. But as I researched further, I found that it was actually just before Laura had disappeared, which then just further solidifies that he did it with the sick purposes of unaliving someone at that time. On June 17, 2016, Millard and Smitch had been found guilty of first degree in the unaliving of Tim. These monsters were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for 25 years. As I said before, this case is relatable to a lot of people. Many people post items for sale online. Any one of us could potentially be a victim of a deranged person on the other side of an inquiry online. Please use caution and always meet prospective buyers in a very public place, because you just never know who you might be meeting up with. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think the police could have done more before Tim's disappearance? Could Tim's life have been saved if the police had investigated the crimes that had occurred a year before? If you don't want to miss the next episode, please be sure to follow or subscribe. Thanks for listening to Crime Time 911. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember to always trust your gut.